In a twist of fate, Mark found himself at the center of an extraordinary connection when a seemingly wild baby bat attached itself to him. Mark embraced his newfound companion, feeding it insects and caring for it like a cherished pet. However, a year into this peculiar relationship, Mark was left utterly stunned when he made a shocking discovery about his companion. After a week of having his bat companion at home, Mark could barely imagine his life without the creature that he had named Arya. He could have never guessed that it would be so fun having a non-common pet like this, and had even started to wonder why more people did not keep bats in the house. His worries first started when Arya seemed to have less energy by the day. In the beginning, she was constantly active at night, never sitting still by the looks of things. She was even, on occasion, flying during the day. This was supposed to be a sign that a bat was doing well if Mark were to believe the forums he had been reading online. But Arya was not doing that anymore these past couple of days. She had actually mostly just been hanging out in his closet, spending as little energy as possible. He wanted to bring her to a vet and have the poor animal checked out. But this is where Mark encountered one of the first problems with having an exotic pet. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories. Most of the local vets had no idea about how to take care of a bat or how to give it a proper checkup. They had never worked on these animals before and therefore had never needed to learn about it. Mark called them all, but most of them told him that they were not too keen on taking a risk with this animal. And the ones who were willing needed Mark to sign a form that they were not responsible for anything bad happening. This did not exactly fill Mark with confidence, and thus he needed to consider alternative options. He cared too much about Arya to just have her die on the operating table of a vet who he knew was not qualified to work on her. But other options were not exactly easy to come by, and thus Mark searched all the corners of the internet for a possible solution. After a while, Mark finally came across a so-called bat sanctuary, which was located a couple of cities away. It would be a drive of about 5 hours, and Mark did not even know if that was possible with a bat. But he decided that calling the sanctuary was the least he could do. They would surely be able to give him some advice. As Mark described his situation to the expert on the other side of the line, he learned that the situation was actually fairly worrisome. The first thing he was informed about was that it was not good for a bat to be kept as a pet at all. They would have trouble getting the necessary movement space and nutrients in a standard house. The bat sanctuary was willing to have a look at Arya and also told Mark that a long drive was not going to put the nail in the coffin for the animal. They did not even want to charge him any money for the procedure, but they have one condition. After they had nursed Arya back to health, she would not go back home with Mark and stay at the sanctuary until she was ready to be released again. The idea alone nearly broke Mark's heart. In these past couple of weeks, he had really bonded with the animal. The thought of having to give it away broke his heart. He was also a rational person and knew that he did not really have a choice, especially because apparently it was not good for Arya to live in his house. And maybe deep down he had always realized this but never wanted to admit to it. He took only a couple of minutes to come to his decision and call the sanctuary back to inform them that he would bring Arya by later that afternoon. He would start to prepare for the journey right away. He did not want to waste any time as his animal friend's health was at stake here. Every day he waited could be a day too long, and the expert also confirmed this. But Mark could have never guessed what that day was going to have in store for him. He prepared the back of his car by making it as dark as possible and giving Arya space to hang from. He also brought enough food and water for her, and hopefully, that would sustain the animal for the 5 to 6 hour drive they were about to make. This drive also gave Mark a lot of time to think, mostly about how Faith had brought him and Arya together now roughly 3 weeks ago. He was hiking in the nearby forest when he suddenly heard some strange sounds coming from the bushes. He speculated that it could be an animal, but none that he was able to recognize. But when he pushed away some of the leaves, something suddenly jumped out of the bushes right at him. It was a rather large-looking bat that had jumped out of the vegetation. He had no idea what this bat was doing here and why it was active during the day. He did not know much about bats, but he was pretty sure that they were supposed to be nocturnal. He eventually concluded that this animal might need help and took it home. Mark was both amused and bewildered by Arya's initial behavior. Unlike the wild, skittish bats he had read about, Arya seemed remarkably comfortable in his home. She fluttered around with an air of curiosity, exploring corners and perches with an unexpected grace. At night, her activity peaked, showcasing her natural nocturnal instincts. Mark often found himself watching her, fascinated by her agile flights and keen senses. Determined to provide the best care for Arya, Mark dove into the depths of the internet, scouring forums and articles about bat care. Each hour spent researching felt like unraveling a mystery. Gradually, Mark transformed from a novice into a knowledgeable caretaker, his home adapting to accommodate Arya's needs. As the days passed, Mark noticed an unspoken bond forming between him and Arya. She seemed to recognize his presence, responding to his movements and sounds. He was touched by the subtle ways she communicated: a flick of her wings, a tilt of her head. Their silent interactions were profound, creating a unique companionship. Mark often found himself in deep thought, reflecting on the silent understanding growing between him and Arya. Her presence brought a unique tranquility to his home. There were no demands, no expectations, just a quiet companionship that filled the spaces of his solitary life. Arya's silent flights around the room became a soothing routine, a peaceful end to his busy days. In her, Mark found an unexpected companion, one that asked for nothing but offered much in return. Initially, Mark dismissed the minor changes in Arya's behavior as her adapting to a new environment. She started spending more time in her designated roosting spot. He reassured himself that it was just a phase, perhaps a natural adjustment. Yet deep down, a small voice of concern began to whisper, wondering if there was more to these subtle changes than met the eye. Mark meticulously prepared for the journey to the Bat Sanctuary. He transformed the back of his car into a dark, cozy haven, hanging a soft cloth for Arya to cling to, packing enough insects and water to keep her comfortable. As he started the car, he felt a mix of apprehension and hope. This journey was crucial for Arya's well-being, and he was determined to make it as smooth as possible. Throughout the drive, Mark's concern for Arya grew. She remained unusually quiet, barely moving in her crate. He stopped several times, checking to ensure she was still breathing and not in distress. Upon arrival at the sanctuary, Mark was greeted with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The staff, experienced in bat rehabilitation, were quick to take Arya for examination. Their doubtful glances towards Mark spoke volumes of their thoughts about a bat being kept as a pet. While he understood their concerns, a part of him felt defensive about the bond he had formed with Arya and the care he had provided. Sanctuary employees bombarded Mark with questions. They inquired about Arya's origin, her diet, and how he had been caring for her. Their questions, laced with a hint of skepticism, made Mark feel uneasy. He explained how Arya had attached herself to him unexpectedly and his efforts to provide her with a good home. Despite his honest intentions, he could sense their doubt, wondering if he had unknowingly contributed to her condition. Handing Arya over to the sanctuary staff, Mark felt a surge of mixed emotions. There was relief that she was finally getting professional care, but also a gnawing anxiety about the outcome. The staff's behavior, though professional, had an underlying current of disapproval. As he watched them carry Arya away, his heart ached with worry and a sense of loss. While waiting in the sanctuary's lobby, Mark overheard a conversation that piqued his concern. A doctor and an employee discussed Arya's condition in hushed tones. His heart raced as he realized Arya's situation might be more complex than he thought. Driven by the snippets of conversation he had overheard, Mark approached the sanctuary staff for answers. His questions, however, were met with evasive and vague responses. Each reply seemed carefully worded, skirting around the specifics of Arya's condition. Their reluctance to share information only fueled Mark's frustration and concern. Suspecting that Arya's case was more mysterious and serious than he had initially believed, Mark's persistent questions and visible anxiety made the sanctuary staff uncomfortable. They politely yet firmly asked him to leave, citing sanctuary policies and the need to focus on Arya's care. Mark sensed an unspoken tension in the air as he was escorted to the exit, leaving him physically and emotionally cut off from Arya and the answers he desperately sought. As evening approached, he made a bold decision to return to the sanctuary. Slipping in unnoticed, he moved with quiet determination. His heart pounded as he navigated the dimly lit corridors, every step taking him closer to uncovering the truth about Arya's mysterious condition. Hiding in the shadows, Mark witnessed an unexpected scene. A group of individuals in formal attire, including a scientist, arrived in haste. They spoke briefly with the sanctuary staff before swiftly taking Arya, now in a secure transport crate. The urgency and secrecy of their actions were alarming. Mark's mind raced with questions as he watched them depart. Mark's heart raced as he followed the vehicle carrying Arya. With a mix of fear and determination, he navigated through the traffic, keeping a safe distance. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, worry for Arya. He knew he couldn't lose them. Arya's well-being and the mystery of her condition depended on this pursuit. The car finally stopped at a secluded research facility, its modern facade hiding the secrets within. As Mark parked his car a discreet distance away, he took in the high security gates and surveillance cameras. This place was more than just a lab. It was a fortress of science, shrouded in mystery. Mark's curiosity intensified, along with his apprehension about what they might be doing with Arya inside. Mark approached the lab but was immediately met with resistance. The security was tight, and his requests to enter were firmly denied. He tried reasoning, explaining his connection to Arya, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Mark knew he needed to find another way to gain access, to understand what was happening with Arya inside those walls. He made phone calls, sent emails, and even tried reaching out through social media. His efforts finally paid off when a sympathetic lab employee agreed to arrange a brief meeting with a representative. Relief washed over Mark, mixed with anxiety. This meeting was his chance to get answers, to understand the mystery surrounding Arya's sudden departure from the sanctuary. During his brief tour of the lab's public areas, Mark was struck by the energy and precision of the facility. Researchers moved briskly through gleaming corridors, their conversations filled with technical terms he barely understood. The hum of advanced equipment and the faint chemical smell of sterilization created an atmosphere of cutting-edge science and secrecy. Every detail he observed heightened his suspicions. Arya, his extraordinary bat companion, had to be more than just a curiosity to attract this level of attention. The meeting in the lab's sterile, white-walled conference room only deepened his unease. Mark faced a panel of experts who spoke in clinical tones, describing Arya's unique biological markers and behavioral anomalies. Yet, for all their scientific jargon, their answers were vague, their explanations incomplete. They seemed to tiptoe around the full truth, offering only fragments of information. Arya, they suggested, was an anomaly, a creature unlike any they had encountered. Mark left the meeting frustrated and suspicious. Sitting in his car afterward, he replayed their words in his mind, searching for hidden meanings in their evasions. His instincts told him they were hiding something profound, something that made Arya far more significant than she appeared. The weight of the mystery pressed heavily on him, and his resolve hardened. He needed answers, no matter how difficult they were to uncover. Days of determined effort led him to secure a meeting with a senior researcher, someone who might provide the clarity he sought. This time, Mark entered the lab not as a concerned pet owner but as a man with a mission. The researcher's demeanor was cautious but not dismissive, and after much probing, they began to reveal pieces of the truth. Arya, Mark learned, belonged to an extraordinarily rare species, one barely documented by science. Her survival in an environment so far from her natural habitat was unprecedented, her ability to adapt and thrive baffling even the most experienced researchers. The lab had been studying her with intense focus, hoping to uncover the secrets of her resilience and her potential impact on the ecosystem. The revelation left Mark awed but unsettled. Arya wasn't just a fascinating companion, she was a living marvel, a key to understanding larger ecological mysteries. Her existence highlighted the delicate interconnections within the natural world and the critical role even the smallest creatures could play. But with this understanding came a painful realization: Arya's place was not in captivity. Over the following weeks, Mark wrestled with an agonizing moral dilemma. Keeping Arya with him would ensure her safety and preserve their bond, but it would deny her the opportunity to fulfill her role in the wild. Releasing her would mean letting go of a companion who had become an integral part of his life, but it was the only way to honor her importance to the ecosystem. Gradually, Mark came to terms with the truth. Arya's rightful place was in the wild, where she could contribute to the balance of nature in ways he could only begin to understand. With a heavy heart, he began working alongside the lab's researchers to prepare her for release. They ensured she was healthy, strong, and ready to thrive in her natural environment. On the night of her release, Mark stood at the edge of the forest, watching as Arya hung from his hand one last time. The air was cool and still, the stars above shimmering like a silent audience to this poignant moment. With a deep breath, Mark extended his hand, and Arya took flight. Her wings spread wide as she soared into the dark, disappearing into the forest canopy. Mark stood in silence, a mixture of pride and sorrow filling his heart. He had done what was right for Arya, though it came at a personal cost. In the days and weeks that followed, he channeled his emotions into supporting conservation efforts, inspired by Arya's story and the profound lessons she had taught him about resilience, connection, and the natural world's intricate design. Years later, news reached Mark of a thriving colony of Arya's species, successfully re-established in its native habitat. He smiled at the thought, knowing her legacy had helped ensure their survival. As he looked up at the stars one quiet evening, he felt her presence, a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and the wild and a reminder of the critical importance of protecting the wonders of the natural world. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.